Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you have my yearly wrap-up, my statistics. And for this video, I'm going to switch to a screen recording in just a little bit where I will walk through my StoryGraph yearly wrap-up. I think this is the first year that they've done this. And then I'll also go to my personal CAWPILE document that I've been using over the year to talk about a few other things. I love statistics and nerdy things. Hopefully you do too. If not, you don't have to watch, but I know there's a lot of other people out there that like statistics too. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, so here we go. We've got the Your 2022 reading wrap up. I really like their graphics on this, which, you know, I highly prefer StoryGraph over Goodreads, but I mean, who doesn't? I read 373 books this year. That's a lot of books. I did contemplate trying to read 400, but no, that didn't happen. I love the contrast here. I also love the fact that technically Two Towers was the last book that I read, but it didn't get in there in time. However, that's totally okay. But ending my 2022 on such a high note and having Hob up here, even though that technically wasn't the last book that I finished, still totally okay. Now, if we scroll down to some of the statistics, I'm going to skip the mood portion because I never go by that. I really like this graph here, although I wonder if it's in July. I listened to a lot of audiobooks. That's how I read so many. I just must not have categorized them on StoryGraph as audiobooks. But you can definitely tell school months, busy school months at least. And then you can see how my audiobook listening went way up in December. That's how I got through as many books as I did in December. I really like this overall graph. Okay, the genres that I spent the most time with. Now, I still have a problem with the fact that they do young adult and middle grade as genres, even though they're actually just age groups. Setting that aside, it is not surprising that my biggest genre by far, like 4 times as many, is fantasy. I read, it looks like 196 of my 373 books were fantasy. That really doesn't surprise me. I've really gotten into my fantasy bag and I have really enjoyed all of the books that I have read. So that's awesome. I do tend to read a lot of young adult and middle grade age group wise. So that's not a terrible statistic to look at. And then we have contemporary. And I think the reason that there's 36 contemporary is because of the CASL list. Because otherwise, I don't tend to pick up contemporary books. And then historical. I'm a historian. I would anticipate this being a little higher, but with fantasy taking up so much room, that's totally okay. Longest book, clearly, Oathbringer. I mean, it's going to be. Close second was Rhythm of War. Shortest book was a Doctor Who comic. Also, not surprising. I read several that were about this length. It says that the average length of the average length of the books I've read was 374 pages. Also not surprising with the fact that I read so much young adult and middle grades. And then it took me around 5 days to finish each book. I think this statistic was thrown off a little bit. I mean, I find it interesting that they put that there. I have a lot of books that I've read in a single day. But I think the statistic was thrown off a little bit by this. It didn't actually take me 152 days to read this book. I just started it at a certain point, paused my reading of it to read other things, and then came back to it. So I think that threw the average days to finish off a little bit. I would guess it's closer to 3. The authors that I spent the most time with in 2022, I'm so happy to see this. If you saw my top 10 books, you would see that both of these authors made it on that list. The only reason Robin Hobb is second is because she's written less books than Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if a person outside of those, churn the books out sort of authors that writes more than Brandon Sanderson. I've read 25 of his books this year. And I've read 17 of Robin Hobb's. There's 16 in The Realm of the Elderlings, and then there's the prequel novella. And then Rick Riordan. I read the graphic novels. I also read the Trials of Apollo series. I'm not sure what the other two are, but it's probably Magnus Chase, if I'm remembering correctly. My average rating, 3.96. It's really interesting that it's not quite 4 stars, but I'm going to do a comparison in just a second to show you just how much higher this is than other years. My 2022 5-star reads. You also saw this in my top 10 video, except for the rereads that are in here. These are all fantastic books. My 2022 ratings, I read 93 4-star books. I will definitely take that. I love how the vast majority was 3.5 and up. Some months were better than others. I'm not really sure why April was up so high, but it does not surprise me that July was lower because that's when I was doing my SEASL project and reading a lot of books that I wouldn't otherwise have picked up, including my only 1.5 star books. So, not surprising that Harry Potter is one of the most shelved. Also not surprising that I'm the only user on Storygraph who's ever shelved this. And then this makes me so happy to see this. This is definitely the highest rated. I love this book, tied for number 1. And then I tried out 214 new authors, which is amazing. I might be getting over that series hump. 196 of the books I read were part of series. I reread 18 total books this year. These were Harry Potter books, the Rick Riordan books, I believe. I'm not quite sure all of the rereads. I know Amari was one. And then I DNF'd, actually, this year. This is a new stat for me. It's kind of sad that this is, because this was on the last day. I did DNF Silver Under Nightfall. There were 5 that I DNF'd. 1 because I lost interest. The other 4 because they just were not for me. Okay. It says I read 61 books for my own shelves this year, but that statistic is off because I haven't updated my own books on Storygraph yet. Okay, so now I'm going to go to this really cool feature that if you pay for the gold subscription, you can actually compare 2 time periods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 2022. I'm going to compare 2 time periods, and I'm going to compare it against 2021. So if we look at my ratings, of course, this is slightly different because I started using Storygraph around July, and that's why there aren't as many of the half stars in here. I had a 3.66 rating in 2021, 3.97. That's a really significant increase, especially given the number of books that I read. Okay, so there you have all of my statistics and information for 2022. I'm really excited about what 2023 holds. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.